Hey guys, welcome to the show today. We have a special guest for you, as we always do on Thursdays, but I think he will particularly bless you and encourage you. My friend Steventhen and I met recently at the CareNet conference in San Antonio, where we both briefly spoke on the main stage, and his story really floored me. And he's really a walking contradiction to the premises of progressivism, and is shining the light. And I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. Steventhen Holland is the poster child for abortion. According to progressivism, the only compassionate thing would have been to murder him. But hardship doesn't justify homicide, and it would be more than 27 years before he was reunited with his birth mother. A foster child, adoptee, and now father of three, Steventhen is a recording artist, worship leader, author, inspirational speaker, and founder of Broken Not Dead Ministries. Steventhen speaks around the country on abortion, foster care, adoption, sexual immorality, substance abuse, and much more. A living reminder that life is always better than death. Steventhen is shining life in a dark, dark culture of death. Buckle up, you're in for a treat. I'm Seth Gruber, and this is Unaborted. Steventhen, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, Seth. So honored to be here.
Yeah, this was a long time coming. Our mutual friend, Mark Newman, who's a phenomenal speaker and has been faithfully speaking in the public square for the preborn for many years, sent me a message months ago saying, you need to have my brother Steventhen on the show. And then we met in person, coincidentally, at the CareNet conference. And boy, of the 6 speakers I think we did, I think you probably had the audience in tears more than anyone else. But God has worked very providentially through your life. And it's a real story of redemption. And so we cover everything in this show. We cover philosophy, ideology, religion, culture, abortion, and getting people to understand these ideas. But more and more, I just wanted to have people who are the contradictions of the culture, who were told that they should have been killed, that they should have never had the right to live. But hardship doesn't justify homicide, and your life is certainly a testament of that. So firstly, because you're sort of, I think, a little bit newer, correct me if I'm wrong, to the pro-life circuit, guests might not be as familiar with your story. So I just wanted you to share your heart, and we did a teaser in the intro here. But what's your story, and how did it start? And then just walk us through how God has so providentially worked in you.
Yeah. Well, I know we don't have a ton of time, so 39 years of life, it's hard to wrap it up, but I'll be as quick as I can. When I was 8 years old, Seth, I was at school, and I had some people come to me and say, man, you are weird and different. And I'm like, an 8-year-old child never wants to hear that. Even adults don't want to hear that. We just want to be liked and loved and accepted. Right. So it hurt, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And they said, well, have you not noticed that you're an entirely different color than the rest of your family? So for the first time, people, when I share that, they're like, really? It took till 8 years old before you realized you were the wrong color, right? But I look at my hand that day, and sure enough, I'm brown, and my family is white. So I come home that day from school, and my mom sat down on the side of the bed with me. She knew something was wrong. And we just had a conversation. And so I found out at 8 years old that the reason my skin color was different than the rest of my family was I was brought into their home as a 7-day-old child, as a foster child. They got me. The only thing they had was 8 pages of typewriter paperwork from 1982. I was born on March 31st. And it had my birth mom's name. Her name was Glenda Sue Holt. And then that really broken information, which they actually gave that to me. I call it a gift today. They put that in my hands that day as an 8-year-old when she's explaining to me what happened. So I was placed in their home on the same bottle I left the hospital with. I was so weak that I couldn't suck a bottle. They had to squeeze milk into my mouth. So this family that wasn't my color, they weren't my blood, they literally nursed me back to health. by holding me. And some people say I'm a little spoiled maybe, but, that's up for debate. But they would squeeze milk in my mouth, and literally they saved my life. So at 6 months old, the state of Tennessee, which gets kind of interesting, they decided that I was actually, because of my skin color, that this home isn't where I should be, that I should be placed in a biracial home or African-American home. So at 6 months old, from 6 months old to age a year and a half, well, actually 2 years, so a year and a half, there was a legal battle that ensued between the Holland family as a foster child to legally adopt me. So wow. I love the fact that this community, predominantly a white community, came behind this foster family to fight for the right to keep the baby in the home, which was me. So for a year and a half, there's a legal battle, them trying to keep me in their home. And I literally, to this day, I still have hundreds of petition letters that were written, a lot of them handwritten, that were sent into the state of Tennessee to be able to keep me. So I look at
adopted family.
Yeah. So the community rallied behind this family to be able to keep me in the home, and it must have worked. At age 2, I officially became Steventhen William Holland. I came into the world as Steventhen William Holt. Okay. So that was something. So I found that out as an 8-year-old child. And people ask me, how did you feel? Like, what did that make you? And if I'm being honest, that's the first time in my life I ever truly remember being broken. I didn't understand why I had to be the wrong color, right? Because that's what I was told. Right. I didn't understand why, this isn't my blood family. And really the biggest thing is why would a mother not want her son? And that was something I was going to carry for a long time. And I didn't realize the pain that I was carrying on the inside until obviously much, much later in life. But it was always something that was always there. I just didn't realize it. I kind of call it a hole in my soul.
Oh, yeah. No, totally. Yeah. Did your adoptive family know the story that you're about to tell us?
No, they did not. So
wow.
literally
so
all
that was
they
a
had
journey for all of you.
Absolutely. Literally all they had was those 8 pages of typewriter paperwork. And then they knew that there could have been some mental handicap, some lack of mental ability from my birth mom, but they weren't sure. So that's kind of where we are. So I also want to say here, being a man of faith, God plays a huge role in my life, and that was established very early on. I always tease when I speak, I had a drug problem growing up. I was drug in and drug out of every church known to man, right? So I knew the name of Jesus, but, having a relationship with him was a little different thing. And in the midst of my brokenness as an 8-year-old child, about 3 to 4 months later, after walking through, what I just found out, I came running to the altar during a church service and said, Lord, I'm broken, I'm hurting. And I've heard that, I've heard all my life that you're the person to run to when I'm hurting and broken and I need healing. Right. And so I came to know the Lord as an 8-year-old child. Which would be something, obviously, as believers, we know that's the start of a journey, but the journey is just getting started. So I say that Jesus plus nothing equals everything, but sometimes that's a daily grind to make Jesus enough for the day. And so what happened was, Jesus plus sports, Jesus plus relationships, Jesus plus this started, getting in the way. So for me, sports was my place that nobody's going to call me weird and different anymore, right? So in middle school, I was a fullback and middle linebacker, 200 none of your business pounds. I got the nickname Earthquake. Later in high school, I got a little bigger, and I went from Earthquake to Freight Train. I had all these these dreams of playing college football, and I had scholarship offers. And 1998, I actually I had a back surgery, 17 years old. I had 3 herniated discs and a pinched nerve from a high school football injury. So here I am, laying in bed, 17 years old, having surgery, and my dreams are crushed, and I'm blaming God. I don't know if anybody out there has ever been there, but, God, why? It's the same question I had as an 8-year-old child, like, why, God? Why would a mother not want her son? Why is this happening to me? So I'm laying in bed, and I come across Romans 12:1 and 2. It says, in view of God's mercy, we offer our body as a living sacrifice. Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by renewing of your mind. And I'm laying there, and it says, only then will you know the perfect will of God. And the Lord just did something in my heart, like, okay, Lord, I'm reading the scripture afresh and anew for the first time, and you're saying that even this brokenness that I carry, like, it's worth it to give it to you. So I laid it down at his feet. I didn't really understand what my life trajectory would look like, but I walked on to campus in Bristol, Tennessee, and I majored in youth ministry. I played baseball for 5 years, earned a scholarship, got my degree. So I was a youth pastor for about 12 years in professional life. I also met my wife there. She was a volleyball player from Tampa, Florida. I tease that I literally married up. I know I'm sitting down right now, but she's 5'11", and I'm 5', none of your business, right? But we decided very early on that we wanted to start a family early. That was kind of in our plans when we got married. So we did that. My wife was pregnant within a few months of being married. 8 weeks into our first pregnancy, my wife has a miscarriage. I'd actually left her at home to go on a Sunday service to be with our youth, and she passed our baby at home alone in the toilet. So here I am, a young husband, a father to be, and guess what? I'm asking God again, and my wife, why? God, all we've wanted to do is be parents. I mean, we can't wait to be parents. Like, what are you doing? So we had to wrestle through that, battle through that. And but God started doing something in me. I look back now with the story. I had something that kind of depression that started to kind of set in, and it took me back even to that 8-year-old child, not having information on. To this day, I still don't know my medical history, but I found out my race a few years ago. A pastor friend of mine purchased a DNA test, and so we don't have enough time on here for me to describe how many different races I am, but we lose our baby, then we have a successful pregnancy who's our 14-year-old today. Her name's Isabella. Then our third pregnancy, 10 weeks in, we actually lost another child. Another baby. This time she had to have a DNC, which I know you all have covered that on some future episodes or post episodes previous. But this time it was different for me as a father because I had to watch my wife be wheeled behind closed doors and then surgically have our lifeless baby removed from the womb. Yeah. So me as a dad, like, when you become a parent, it's not about you anymore. You will do anything to protect your children. And where I was mentally, it was like, Lord, I don't know at the time, I didn't know my race. I have no medical history. So are we losing these babies because of my past, because of generational curses, or, I just went into my head, and it was the enemy started attacking me and saying, it's your fault. This is all your fault. This is you. Right. And that's where I was. And so I was a youth pastor at the time, working with middle school students. And we've lost these two babies, and I'm just not in a good place. But I remember we had another pregnancy who's our 11-year-old daughter. She's actually going to be 12 on Saturday, Eliana. Wow. And we also have an 8-year-old daughter, Cadence. We call her KK. But when we were pregnant with Eliana, that fourth pregnancy, remember, I'm still kind of in that place of struggling, depression, with all that. The Lord brought me back to that 8-year-old child, and he brought me back to that special gift that I was given, that my parents laid in my lap, actually, and said, this is the 8 pages of typewriter paperwork. This is all we have. And the Holy Spirit just spoke to me that day, and he said, it's time. So all these years, that's 27 years, Seth, of life, like questioning and wondering, where's my mom at? Does she have her own family? Like, should I reach out to her or not? Right. It just never felt like the right time. But that day, God said, it's time. So I took those 8 pages of typewriter paperwork and I started searching on Google, just doing some name searches. And I found a little piece, a little piece, a little piece. But on day 3, I came across a website for a man named Steve Holt. And Steve Holt's a magician and ventriloquist from Spartanburg, South Carolina. Okay? Weird guy, sawing people in half, talking with dummies. I mean, I did not want to. I'm like, why am I on this man's website? So, but I start looking at his bio, and on his bio, literally every single name on my paperwork from 1982 is represented on this online platform.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, okay. And then my birth mom's name, Glenda Sue Holt, he says that's my baby sister. So I was like, this can't be a coincidence. So long story short, I sent him an email.
Wow.
He reads the email. Within a couple months later, I'm on a plane flying from Tampa, Florida to Spartanburg, South Carolina, and I'm meeting my birth uncle that I didn't know existed, after 27 years. And 2 grown men just weeping, hugging, crying. And in the midst of that, I spent like 2 days with him, and we just kind of swapped stories and got to know each other. And he told me how I came to be. And so what that looks like is, he said there were 6 of them. There's 6 siblings. He's one of 6. All of them, except for him and the family, were mentally handicapped in some way, mentally impaired.
Wow.
So they were all, their parents died at an early age, and they were all split into like foster care, group homes, into the system. And my mom, my birth mom, was actually the baby of the family. There were 3 girls, 3 boys. And so when she aged out of the system, because of her lack of mental ability, she was placed into a mental facility in Rome, Georgia. And so she's 18, but mentally she's only 11-year-old. Okay.
Wow.
So they set her up with kind of a work program to give her some type of worth, and she could walk a short distance and then walk back. So it was pretty lenient and loose. Well, one evening on her way back home, she was actually gang raped by 5 men. And so this is an 18-year-old outer body, but an 11-year-old mind. So she just gets raped by these 5 men. Do you think she's wanting to tell anybody about what's happening to her? So she comes back to the facility after she's been attacked. Nobody knew what happened. Some months go by. They realize that she's pregnant. And so this is a state-ran facility. She has no income, no job, no family, no resources. What do you think they're telling her to do? And obviously the number one option, they're saying her only option was to abort me, to kill me.
Wow.
But by the grace of God, this 11-year-old mental, 18-year-old, 11-year-old mental-minded woman said, the life that I'm carrying is worth fighting for. So she literally ran away, got away from the facility. We don't know how.
No way.
And she carried me the majority of the pregnancy homeless. The last time my uncle had actually even thought about me, I was in the womb 27 years before this, when I'm meeting him. And he had tried to care for her and I, but she has this pattern of, I think, when people would get close to her and it made her feel uncomfortable and she would run. That was her pattern. Yeah. So she ran away. By the end of the pregnancy, 9 months pregnant, she was living in a cardboard box behind an old grocery store in this little town outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee called Whitwell. If you're from there, it's Whitwell, Tennessee, right outside of Chattanooga. And she was, by the end of the pregnancy, living in this cardboard box, 9 months pregnant.
Wow.
And this 16-year-old kid named Bobby came around the back of this store, and he sees this box move, and he pulls it back, and inside this box is this 9-month pregnant woman, 18 years old. And, the fact I can't help but laugh at this part of the story, because this 16-year-old boy loads up this 9-month pregnant 18-year-old woman, walks her back home to his parents' house, to his home, and says, "Hey, Mom, Dad, look what I found." And he's like, "Can we keep it?" He's like, "Can we keep this? It's not a cat, it's not a dog, it's a woman." And they're like, by the grace of God, they said yes.
Wow.
But they cared for us for 2 weeks. She got to the hospital in Erlanger Hospital in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and she gave birth to this guy here that she named Steventhen William Holt. So people ask me, how did you get your name? And so Stephen was my uncle, who I'm meeting at 27, And
No way.
William, my middle name, was my grandfather, her dad. So
Okay.
the way she speaks is, I want to name him Stephen, then William. But whoever heard it that day recorded it. They put Steventhen together. So that's
No
my
way.
first name, and then William is my middle name.
That's a great story.
So
Wow.
it's you think it's this like dramatic thing, but
Right.
I had a little lady in church one time say to me, "I love that what you're saying, but then God, but then God," and
Yeah.
and I
Wow.
truly believe that God. I mean, His hand was all in this, but 7 days later, after they get me home, I actually found out in researching for my book, they actually stole me from the hospital, snuck me out because Human Services was trying to take me from her.
Oh.
And she wanted to keep her son, but they knew that with her lack of
Whoa.
mental ability that she, it'd be hard. But this family, this is 1982 too, so security is not quite as heightened.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but they brought us home, brought me home, and then 7 days later, this 16-year-old boy realized that this woman can't care for this child. She had given me water to drink, rolled over on me at night, slept with me in the bed with her. He loaded us up and actually took us to Human Services while his parents were at work and dropped us off.
Wow.
And so 7 days old, I go into this foster family who had 2 years prior had a miscarriage of their own, and God had used that brokenness in their life to open up their home to take in children, and they were longing for one more little boy, so they got me. And then to end, that was enough. I mean, that was powerful enough. But then my uncle looks at me and says, "Hey, your birth mom's alive, and she's 5 hours south of where we stand right now." And he asked me one question. He said, "Do you want to meet her?" And what the Holy Spirit spoke to me a couple months before us meeting was, "The time is now. It's yes. Let's go." So we went down, and I got to meet my mom, Glenda Sue Holt, which I call my hero, for the first time at 27 years old. And I just happened to capture it on video. So got a little treat that you can watch on YouTube if you care to watch that.
We'll put that
But
in the
that's it, Seth.
show notes. You showed that at CareNet, and that was powerful. And because she didn't know that she was meeting her son, right?
No, she didn't know, because we didn't know how it was going to go. We honestly didn't know how with her, she's 46 years old in the video, but she's still only 11-year-old mental mind.
Wow.
So we had plans to do something completely different than what happened on the video. God just took over. But yeah.
That's amazing, brother. The left loves to tell like the worst stories possible on abortion, and they create sometimes it sounds almost like a fictional account of like the worst circumstances you could possibly imagine, and then they use that and they prop that up as their case study in why abortion needs to remain legal. So they'll say something like, an underage, mentally retarded homeless woman who's gang raped. It's like, oh wait, and then but that's what they do, and then but of course it's so dishonest because they paint it as if that's like the norm, where it's like the vast majority of abortions are obtained for socioeconomic reasons, pure convenience. Not to say that everything's a peachy cream, not to say that it's all sunshine and rainbows. Yeah, there's difficult circumstances, but usually the reasons are still socioeconomic. They're not mom's gonna die. They're not like an 11-year-old girl whose hips are too small to be able to handle childbirth. It's just pure convenience. But your story is literally the case study that these depraved, disgusting individuals create, so that when you say, no, I don't support abortion in that circumstance, now you look like some moral monster, right? Who's making this woman go through this. And yet here you are, because life is always better than death, and hardship doesn't justify homicide. And so I wanted to ask you this. What has your journey in life been like in a culture that tells you, and in a polity, and with politicians who say that you shouldn't exist? We talk about this a lot with abortion survivors, of whom I have many friends that we have on the show. And they talk about the trauma it is to live in a country under a president who says that they shouldn't exist. that they didn't have the right to exist, that they should be dead. But that's very close to your story as well. You barely survived, and
Right.
your mother checked every conceivable checkbox that you could think of for who the abortion industry targets as a prospect or labels the ideal patient, such that choosing life for the child is actually portrayed as the selfish, evil decision, right? You would bring
Yeah.
a child into this mess. You would make a woman like that go through that. And yet, I'm sure when our listeners watch the video of you and your mom meeting, that just completely destroys any of the
Right.
ideologues and talking points that the culture presents. But what was your journey like, learning your story, and then starting to speak out against abortion, with a story and a mother whom the culture says should have killed you, and meeting people who support abortion, who paint your mother as the ideal client for abortion, and yet you looking them in the face and saying, shut up, take your bigotry somewhere else.
Right.
I'm here. I am
Right.
that child. What's that been like for you as you began to speak out on life?
Yeah. Well, Seth, if I'm being honest, like I'm walking in it right now. Because I was a youth pastor and a worship leader, and I still am in some ways, but I'm not
Yeah.
on staff anywhere. I'm full time with my ministry and speaking, like you said, being an advocate. But I didn't know the power of my story. I didn't know that, like all these things that you just said. I mean, yes, my journey into the pro-life movement is, yes, I've always been pro-life. I've always supported, but I didn't know that my voice mattered. You know what I'm saying? I didn't know
Yeah.
that my voice, like even standing here, like, or sitting here talking to you, I'm walking in that purpose to me. I think that I truly believe that, not that I'm, the Holy Grail is not the right word, but not anything holier than thou. But I think that I have a voice that needs to be heard. I have a story that needs to be heard right now. And, I'm speaking at pregnancy center fundraisers and like orphan care ministry fundraising events and some awareness things. And, just the stories, the ministry that happens out of that.
Yeah.
That, I mean, I've literally had people, that actually were worked on staff at pregnancy centers that were still struggling with whether pregnancy should be justified in the case of rape or incest. And
Yeah,
and
there's
I've
some
sat there and
squishes
shared
like
my
that.
story. I've sat there and shared my story, and they've been able to meet my mom on a screen, and they come up after the event, and like, you literally just changed my mind. And the whole table, we had a small group from church that was here with me, and we were talking about that exact same thing, and all of us kind of came here under the same, like, well, okay, in this case, maybe, but then literally we all left weeping,
That's right.
kind of chastising ourselves, like that. How could we ever think that,
Yeah. That's right.
So I feel like that's like, it's affirming me when those things happen. It's affirming me that I'm right where I need to be, that I can't continue to stay silent, that my voice needs to be heard. Yeah. So I think, to answer that fairly, I don't even really know if I fully grasp the power of my story yet.
Yeah.
I'm seeing it.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, then God. Yeah, well, we need to get you debating some pro-aborts, Steventhen.
Yeah.
We got to do some street activism or man on the street stuff together, and I'll provide the historical philosophical approach, and you'll provide the personal, and we'll just whack some demons on the head because what do they say to you, right? That's why I want to help abortion survivors and people like yourself either find their voice or just live in their voice and speak loud and speak all of the time, because those voices demolish the bigotry of choice by simply existing, right? It's because it's like, hey, should I be dead? Hey, do you want to kill me? And they go, oh no, Steventhen, I love you, brother. Well, no, actually you don't, because you actually believe I should have been murdered in the womb.
Right.
Oh, well, that was different, Steventhen. That you weren't you in the womb. You were still just a fetus. You weren't a person yet. Oh, I wasn't a person, huh? Oh, so you believe the same thing that the KKK believe, that not all humans are persons. In other words, when did Steventhen get a right to life? Was it when the fetus fairy sprinkled magical personhood conferring fairy dust on him as he slipped out of the birth canal, or did he have a right to life in the womb? And if he had a right to life in the womb and he had dignity then abortion was not justified. And if it wasn't justified for you, Steventhen, then it wasn't justified for anyone, because yours would have been the only circumstance that would have been maybe plausible to get on board with killing you, because the circumstances were so dire, which means that if you had a right to life, every unborn child has a right to life. And so living in that voice and speaking out is so important, because it challenges the narrative and it challenges the status quo by presenting the true picture of reality, the true picture of life and liberty against these prevailing stories in the culture that sound compassionate. They masquerade under the mantle of false compassion, but they're anything but. It's homicide, it's bigotry, it's evil, and it's eugenics, and it's might makes right. And so we couldn't be more grateful for your story and seeing how God will continue to use you. But, this reminds me of our current political moment, Steventhen. So right now, last week, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health, the Mississippi 15-week abortion ban, the Gestational Age Act, which would ban abortion before viability, which is a stupid subjective term that means when the baby can survive outside the womb. Which has been deemed something like 24 weeks, even though the youngest baby to be born and survived was 21 weeks and 3 days. And so it's at the Supreme Court now. They'll likely issue a ruling in the new year, or they have to by June. But I listened to all the oral arguments, and I was actually encouraged with how skeptical the justices were in striking down the law. If this case stands, it would be a functional overturning of Roe versus Wade, which has never allowed states to ban abortion before the stupid subjective term known as viability. So Amy Coney Barrett, the Catholic Supreme Court justice that the left lost their freaking minds over when she was nominated by Trump, she mentioned during the oral arguments, and I'm gonna connect it to you here in a second, about safe haven laws. Right? She made this point to make the point that no one is forcing women to take care of their babies. The baby can be safely surrendered at safe haven locations and placed up for adoptions. And so she was making this political point to argue that, women aren't really being that inconvenienced. You have to go through pregnancy, but most women can continue to work, and then you don't have to mother the child. Now, that's wrong. I think in a just society, parents need to be required to raise their own children, and you've experienced the heartache, or what we call genealogical bewilderment, to quote my friend Katie Faust, that children go through when they've been abandoned by their parents. But she just made the point to say, hey, no one's forcing you to mother this child. Well, the New York Times, in response to that argument that Amy Coney Barrett was making, came out swinging for abortion. The Gray Lady, all the news that's fit to print, the most mainline Protestant or mainline progressive journalistic institution in the country, which loves them some abortion. And they published a guest essay by an adoptee named Elizabeth Spires. And I don't know if you saw this piece. It kind of took off. And the piece was titled, "I Was Adopted. I Know the Trauma It Can Inflict." So, in other words, foster care and adoption, Steventhen, are not a good solution to abortion. So she's responding to Amy Coney Barrett saying, that's not a good argument. Safe haven laws and the fact that babies can be safely surrendered, placed in the foster care, or adopted, even though, by the way, there's not enough babies to go around. So parents who want to adopt newborns vastly outnumber the amount of newborns available for adoption. Okay, that's just a point of fact. But the New York Times says, no, that's not a good argument, Amy Coney Barrett, you stupid Catholic bigot, because adoption can be very traumatic. And now, if you translate that, Stephen, then what they're saying is, because adoption can be traumatic for children, we need abortion. It's like, what? Right, welcome to the culture of death. Like, wait, isn't it traumatic to kill children through abortion? No, that's reproductive health care. But it's traumatic if born children are adopted. So what do you say to that? As someone who was placed in the foster care system, adopted, and now speaks into these issues, what do you say to the New York Times and these people who say that we need abortion because adoption is not a good solution to unwanted children?
Right. Well, first of all, I'd say look at my life. I have 3 beautiful daughters. I get emotional over that. I say, I look at ministry, just the lives that I think I'm nobody special, right? But I show up and share my story, and there's an altar full of people that healing is being brought, and it's not just about. I mean, it's literally addiction recovery, or just stuff, just life. And the fact that I get to speak into that I get to make music, that's being recorded and played all over the world, that people are sharing things about how God used that one song to keep them from killing themselves.
Wow.
It's just like I look at that, and it's like, and you mentioned earlier, like, was my life perfect? Did there were issues. I mean, growing up, like, dating was awful for me. I was a brown kid in a predominantly white community in the South, and it's like just some things like that. Even, I mean, my adopted family was not perfect. We fought just like every other family does.
Right.
But I look at, like, my life has purpose. My life matters. You ask my 3 daughters, like, to have dad in their life. For my wife of 15 years that, she couldn't imagine doing life without anybody but me.
Yeah.
I mean, my life matters. And for you to go back to, to the womb and say, just because of circumstances that I shouldn't be here, that hurts. It hurts, because, and, again, being a man of faith, I think God has a bigger plan than the circumstances. And I know,
Well, what are we
that's
celebrating this month, right?
Exactly. Absolutely.
I always say
An
that
unplanned
Mary
pregnancy
was-
that changed the
That's
world
right.
forever.
That's right. I always say that Mary was the perfect Planned Parenthood prospect, Stephen.
Absolutely.
A teenager, unmarried, with a fiance threatening to leave her, where she would have been treated as a social pariah by her community for a pregnancy outside of wedlock. I mean, that's perfect prospect for an abortion.
Yeah.
And yet that's where salvation enters history.
Well, and I look at, and again, like, you asked me what I would say. I mean, I would just say, look at my life. I mean, and that I think that's the power of my story. It is my story. If nothing else, I can at least challenge your thought process to say, well, maybe, like, just to put that doubt in a good way of, like, well, maybe circumstances don't dictate, maybe the life is important, and you never know. And I always say this, I mean, if a child is born, and let's say it's an adolescent, and you realize the horrific stuff that child's going through, let's say in foster care, that they're being mistreated, would you kill them just so they don't have to suffer the hardship? Like, when
you're in the womb. Yep.
And I know you're probably going to ask me about ministry later, but that's how powerful I think brokenness is. Some of the most powerful people on the planet are the most broken people, but they persevered. You have to go through the process for your faith to be fortified, and then the vision to become clear. But again, it's having a God lenses, that God perspective, which everybody doesn't have, and I realize that. But when you can see that, man, God is that powerful to take something that seems so broken and so desolate, but he's going to use that brokenness to bring this amazing glory to his name. And that's just kind of where I look at my story. I always said that God gives his toughest battles to his toughest warriors. And we're in a fight right now. We're in a fight for life. And the way I look at it is, I've got my armor on, you know what I'm saying? And my fight is, I'm going to continue to share my story and be a light in the darkness, because, again, I mean, I feel like my story trumps most of the arguments that we could have on whether life has purpose or not.
That's right. Nailed it, brother. Well, and your armor is that much thicker for having been to the darkest places, right? And so that's why Apostle Paul says, when I am weak, then I am strong.
Right.
For Christ says that my power is made perfect in weakness. And it reminds me also of something Malcolm Muggeridge once said, Steventhen, regarding this question you were saying about, when was I valuable? Did my life matter in the womb? Or did it only matter when I was outside of the womb? And Malcolm Muggeridge once said that either life is always and in all circumstances sacred, or it is intrinsically of no account. It is inconceivable that it should be in some cases the one and in some the other. That in some circumstances it could be sacred and worth protection. And in other circumstances, life could be
Right.
intrinsically of no account whatsoever. I mean, that's stupid because we have value simply because of our human nature and the fact that we're image bearers of God, which means that we have that value from the moment we're human,
Right.
the moment of conception. So as we sort of wrap up, Steventhen, why don't you just share with us how God has taken your brokenness and created beauty out of it and reached so many people. Your ministry is called Broken Not Dead. Is that correct?
Yeah, Broken Not Dead Ministries. Well, honestly, I look back at my life, and obviously the brokenness I've walked through, but I've also, being a student pastor, being a minister in churches, leading worship, this number of years, you just come across a lot of brokenness. But to realize that, especially in the church, but outside the church, but, a heart for both secular and church, we're all broken. We all truly are broken. But here's the thing, we're not dead yet. And there's a lot of people that have walked through brokenness in their life, and some, some more broken than others, but they treat it like a death sentence,
Right. Yeah.
and they stop living, they stop finding purpose in that life. And I feel like what we do, obviously I get to share my story. I do that. I write songs called Songs of Hope. They're all a song of hope, inspirational. So, I have my platform God's created, but Broken Not Dead is creating a platform for other people to share their story. So we do kind of two platforms. We do Broken Not Dead Stories. So it's kind of like an I Am Second, if you ever seen those.
Yeah.
We actually give people an opportunity to share their story. We release that out on YouTube. And so that's a virtual option. And we've done 15 stories now we've shared. So we do that. So God brings these people's stories along, my path. And I just like, hey, would you be willing to share? We get donor support to cover the cost of it and launch it out. And then we do Broken Not Dead events where we partner with the community, get sponsorship to cover cost, try to make it free for the community. And we use the power of storytelling and music to bring hope to broken people. So that's it's a unification of the community, very kingdom driven. It can be pregnancy centers, drug rehabilitation centers, churches, whatever, to partner together and be a place of healing for the brokenness that either be in an outdoor venue, indoor venue. So that's kind of our two platforms. And so I just look at the power of my own brokenness and how God's worked in it, and it's trying to encourage other people to say, you know what, it's not the end of the story, it's just part of the story.
That's right, amen. Yeah, I love how God's using you too, Steventhen, because I can take people to school on logic and on argumentation, but and that will work with some. It's primarily valuable in its public engagement aspect to shift the culture towards life, but unfortunately, individuals typically don't change their mind very quickly simply because they were presented with an airtight case against their position. We're too prideful. And in today's day and age, we think and learn visually, and we think and learn emotionally far more so than we do rationally. Of course, typically you want those things united, right? We're both mind and spirit, right? We're both body and soul, and we feel, but we also think. But unfortunately, there's a lot less of the latter going on in today's political discourse, and so people are moved at a far deeper level and are more willing to change their mind when they feel differently about the topic in question. And that's why storytelling is so powerful. And that's why your story does help shift people's thinking on abortion, because it presents the thinker with no other option than to either abandon their pro-choice position or tell you don't matter.
Right.
And the second is not a very nice one. And so people are willing to change their minds typically when they begin to feel differently first, and then they're open to changing how they think. So while I tend to do more of the latter, yours is actually often more needed to change individuals' thinkings on abortion. And so I love how God's using you in this moment with an obsession with stories and emotions and feeling and my truth, to say, well, here's my truth.
Right.
My mother was a teenager who was mentally retarded and was gang raped, and I nearly died and was in the foster care system and then adopted, and then I met her later, and she told me she loved me and that she was never going to abort me. So what do you say to that? Now obviously you say it more graciously than I would, but
Drop
God's
mic.
using it powerfully. Yeah, that's right, mic drop. So anyways, brother, we'll have to do something together, and we'll certainly have you on again. But where can people connect with you, your ministry, to learn more, or to book you for an event? We have lots of pregnancy center folks that listen to this, and pastors, if they want to get on board with how God's using you.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I'm on all the social media, Facebook, Instagram, all that. But the quickest way by any is to go to steventhen.com. It's just my first name, so on my own website, right? But steventhen.com for me personally, and then for Broken Not Dead, it's brokennotdead.com. So
praise God.
The both those website platforms will get you where you need to be.
Is your mom still alive?
She is not. Okay. And I actually, she passed away a little over a year ago. She died Thanksgiving night of 2020. She actually choked on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the facility, the mental facility that she was in. And my uncle called me and asked me, what do you want to do? Because her vitals weren't, they had her hooked up to machine. And I said, what are we waiting on? I know in the video, which some of you hopefully will watch, she said, I love Jesus. And that's enough for me. I know that one day I have the hope that I have because of my relationship with Christ is I'll see her again. And she's whole and complete now. And Seth, I know this may not... I had people tell me after they found out that she had passed, I'd shared on Facebook and Instagram and let people know because, we're so connected across the country. Yeah. And right. I said, they told me, your mom's not just my hero, or she's not just your hero, she's my hero too. And that's how much life matters.
That's right. That's right.
That's how much life matters. So anyways.
That's right. And she is a hero. She is a hero.
She is. She's mine for sure.
Yeah, with all the pressure to kill you. Incredible, brother. Well, thank you, man. Thanks for blessing us. Thanks for coming on. We'll be praying for your ministry, and you guys go connect with Steventhen. Go follow him. If you're a pregnancy center, youth pastor, whatever you do, these kind of events, consider Steventhen to bring out to really light a fire under your young people in your church or your pregnancy center. He'll shake things up, as I think we are increasingly in need of in America and in the church right now. So thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
You're welcome, Seth. Thank you guys for having me. Blessings.
You too, man. Thank you guys for joining the show today. Powerful story. Share this with some pro-choicers, and ask them to listen to it if they're willing to talk with you. I know you have friends and family members that are pro-choice. And ask them when Steventhen's life began to matter. And ask those hard questions, and ask them to listen to this as well. And that maybe they will begin to feel differently about abortion and begin to think differently about it as well. If you want to connect with me online, head on over to SethGruber.com, SETHGRUB as in baby boy ER.com to sign up for my newsletter, to see my speaking schedule, or to book me for an event, as 2022 is already beginning to fill up for the spring and into the summer. We are still on the move in churches, waking people up to start pro-life ministries and end abortion before it's too late to do so. So please do that. If you want to support the show and help us reach more people, create more types of digital content, and engage in the public square, head on over to patreon.com/unaborted, patreon.com/unaborted. Check out our tiers and the perks you get for supporting the show, and we really appreciate it. Until next week, I'm Seth Gruber, and this is Unaborted.